is going to host this session, and I can't wait to hear from everyone. So over to you, Craig.
Right, we're on. Okay, thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone. Well, welcome, everyone, to our special PRAXIS session this year, Tales from the Other Side. We've got 5 fantastic speakers here to tell you about their extraordinary PhD journeys, how they survived to tell the tale. I'm your host, Craig Wilson. I'm speaking from beautiful downtown Goodman Plaza on Lismore campus, which is Bundjalung country. Before we get started and before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands across which we're having this fantastic meeting. I'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'd like to acknowledge the unique role they play in Australia's cultural life. And I'd also like to acknowledge that the first Australians never, ever have ceded sovereignty over their country. And this is always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thanks, everyone. So to get started, we've got 5 fantastic guests from a diversity of disciplines and methods and career before PhD and outcomes afterwards. So this is going to be fun. Look, if you feel free to pop some questions in the Zoom chat, if you like. There'll be heaps of time, I'm sure, at the end to have more of an interactive sort of session. But if I see some interesting questions along the way, that might be fun as well. But first, let me introduce our fantastic panellists in order of which I know them. And if you'd like to wave hello and smile when I call you out. So my first guest, I'm proud to present my dear old comrade, Dr. Allison Watts.
Hi.
The Foundation Secretary of the Postgrad Association and a former president too.
Yes.
Thanks for coming along, Alison.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Robert Lingard.
Hello.
Robert has worked as the university chaplain for many years and is also a foundation member of the Postgrad Association. That's how far we go back. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you.
Joanne Edney. Jo is, you know, I've known next along the line. Jo previously worked with National Parks and Wildlife, and then she came, luckily for me, she came to work with us. She actually worked with me in this office, delivering our fabulous program of advanced skills training. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you.
Next, we have Maia Osborn. Maia's an old hand at PRAXIS conference. Maia tells me that she used to be a primary school teacher and grew up in the bush in somewhere wild and remote. When I asked her, was that a hippie commune? She said more or less, but hasn't described. That's my words, not hers. Welcome, Maia. And finally, we've got the fantastic Peter Wong, who again has presented before at PRAXIS himself. Peter was actually, had completed his DBA before undertaking his PhD. So he's done the double whammy. Prior to that, Peter tells me he was a travelling trainer, principally in business and management. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Hello.
So we might get started. I might start with Jo. So Jo, would you like to tell me a little bit about what was your research topic and how did you come to research it?
My research topic was called Lust for Rust, Wreckdivers and the Management of Underwater Cultural Heritage. It came about because I was an area manager for national parks at the time. When I first kind of started thinking about it, I was getting really frustrated with downhill mountain bikers trashing the park. And I was also frustrated by management's approach to it. They just said, go and find them. And I thought there's got to be a better way to manage people. They're obviously there because they love the bush. Let's find out more about them. And that frustration led me to this because I'm really passionate about wreck diving, and there was no research in that space. So I thought this is my opportunity to bring my passion and my background to do some unique research. So that's pretty much how it came about. So it was basically looking at the human dimensions of wreck diving and managing underwater cultural heritage. So things like shipwrecks and aircraft wrecks. And I used a mixed methods approach in my research. So I did a survey of wreck divers, so that was all quantitative, but I also did something no one else had done before. I put GoPro cameras on divers' heads and they went wreck diving, and I was able to see what they were looking at, what they were doing from their perspective. So I was able to develop a new method of looking at behaviour from first perspective. I also wore a camera so I could get more context and a different perspective. But what I did, it informs underwater cultural heritage. A lot of maritime archaeologists think all wreck divers are out there to trash the place, which is not the case. So it gives them some quantitative data, some empirical data, I mean, on that. And it also was aimed at giving wreck divers a better experience, so understanding where they're coming from. And the way I analysed the data, I used software, but the way I did it also contributes more broadly to a new method of tourism research. So that's probably enough for now.
That's fantastic. I might move on to Peter now. Peter, can you tell us a little bit more about your project and how you found yourself on your PhD journey?
Wow. Thanks, Craig, for introducing me as a double whammy, Dr. Wong. I still like to start with DBA first. I did my DBA in 2009 and got it in 2012. It was pretty much a straightforward journey for me. I came from business management background, so review on management literature was piece of cake. Not really, but more or less. In methodology, I chose a familiar business case study methodology, and I follow Dr. Robert Yin's books on case study research and design. And I also chose a mixed method management, it was a piece of cake. Then I followed Harvard business model of SWOT analysis, and it was a no-brainer. I got my DBA in no time. Then I became complacent, and I thought doing a PhD is it's just as easy. I was so wrong, Dr. Wrong. So I was chalk and cheese. Because I have no background in health or well-being. Literature review on medical model, psycho model, social model, disability model. Wow, it's just too much for me. I nearly quit. But my supervisor, they were very, very good, very passionate. And they encouraged me to move on with a whip. So I struggle on. I move on to methodology. I chose autoethnography. Whoa, oh my God. That was a mistake using autoethnography. It's anything go. There is no law, there is no rules, there is no guideline. It's just like the wild, wild west of yesterday. So I created my own autoethnography methodology. It's called evocative/analytic autoethnography, just to keep the preeminence of a story told without subjugating that into an analysis language. That upset my supervisory team. So I have to publish a number of papers to get myself established, which I did. Then, because it's an evocative analytic approach, data analysis was extremely challenging. So I have to use a qualitatively quantitative analytical method. Wow, that didn't go down too well. Good that I have Dr. Philip Abram, my study buddy, and he said, go on, go for it. Luckily, I did. I have no drama with examinations. My examiners love my innovative approaches. So I became Dr. Wong this year.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wong. that's a great story. I might move on to Maia. Maia, could you tell us briefly, something about your research project and how you came to find yourself undertaking that journey?
Sure. So despite my very free range kind of immersive childhood in the bush, as an early career teacher, I felt quite ill prepared to embrace environmental education holistically. I was trying to find my feet, and I was looking around to see how other teachers were doing it, and I wasn't seeing much at all in the schools that I was working in. So I was really determined to learn from the experts, so practicing teachers, to inform environmental education theory and practice for myself and for the wider education community also. And so my research was called, the title of my thesis was Listening to Environmentally Conscious Teachers, Stories of Philosophy, Pedagogy and Practice in Environmental Education. And it involved a narrative inquiry approach, 2 pilot studies and a main study. I went on a 3-month research road trip down the east coast of Australia, which was awesome. I spent 1 week with 7 teachers, so 7 weeks all up. I developed a theoretical assemblage as part of my research. I wrote way too much, probably 100,000 words too much, and had to cull, I've
encountered that problem.
I took a lot longer because I had to cut my work down so much, but it was definitely important to do so.
Yeah, save some of it for journals, mate.
Yeah.
Robert, might move on to Robert. Robert, you've had a really interesting project. Can you tell us what it was about and how you came to find yourself undertaking a rotten bloody PhD on the thing?
Well, can I start with the second part first? I became fascinated with axolotls, or Mexican walking fish, as a small child when my father took me to a pet shop to buy goldfish. I later, when I was at university doing my science degree, I got my honours degree in human genetics, worked in tissue culture and hospital laboratories. And at the same time, I was keeping axolotls and breeding them. But when I was doing my undergrad studies, instead of actually doing what I was supposed to be doing, I was reading the books in the library on the history of the study of axolotls and developmental anatomy and whatever. So I developed all these ideas and understandings about the way that animals develop. Then I did theological studies, and there was an ethics class, and the teacher realized I had some science background, said, would you go and do the IVF stuff? So I went and researched, found out their information was out of date, updated all that. So my interest in that sort of area developed. At the same time, or a similar time, the Dolly the sheep was announced to the world. And so there's this big international discussion of human reproductive cloning. So, not trying to make things easier for myself, I entered the third discipline, sociology, and looked at attitudes to human reproductive cloning and the ways in which Australians justified their attitudes during the period of our public policy debate, say 1997 through to the end of 2006. There were 3 parts to my study. I took the literature review not as the nice little bit you stick at the front of your thesis, but as a source of data. So I did that, discovered there were quotations recorded within the papers that I was looking at that resulted in a pooled analysis embedded within the systematic literature review. The second part, which was the biggest, was the document study. So that was looking at Hansard, which is the most boring data source you will ever encounter. So Hansard from government committees, from Senate and from House of Reps, and also from public submissions to government inquiries. And the third part was semi-structured interviews with 13 participants who had contributed documents in the initial Australian debates. So that involved interviewing politicians, religious leaders, philosophers, ethicists, and also just general members of the public. Small number. Did those three things: sociological study through a critical realist lens, and looked at the way that, although Australia glossed over the way that people responded to human reproductive cloning, I established that there are more than just a we want this gone sort of attitude. And I looked at the nuance within that, and also extended one of the theoretical frameworks that I was looking at from 8 categories to a 9th one. So that's what's kept me occupied for far too many years.
Thanks for sharing that, Robert. And finally, my old friend and comrade, Allison Watts, tell us about your wonderful project and how have you found yourself on this PhD journey?
Okay, thanks, Craig. So my topic was about mothers in mental institutions from the early 20th century. I collected 31 mothers' mental patient files of women admitted to psychiatric institutions in Victoria. Once I had the files, I examined the language used to describe mothers' behaviour. Today, we would think about these mothers as suffering postnatal depression or postnatal psychosis, but the files I had were from the 1920s and the language was quite different. The way I came into this topic was I have a grandmother, or had a grandmother, that was missing from our family for about 40 years. And I found that she was committed to a mental institution in Victoria. So I use post-structural and feminist approaches to examine the way mothers were talked about in those mental patient files. That might do me for now.
Sure. Well, look, thanks. That's all great. So you can see, everyone, what a wonderful wealth of approaches and knowledge bases and stuff we have in our panel here. So I'm just I'm feeling absolutely privileged. I'd like to move on now. I'd like us all to think about. We'll move on to some more positive stuff. But look, the PhD journey. I know that everyone out there in that audience is going to feel intimidated at some point. The PhD journey can be tough and grueling. I don't think I've ever met anyone who said it was a breeze. So I'd like to ask you first, Rob, perhaps. What do you think was your major challenge along the way? Now, this could be, part of the research process itself, or, remember, we undertake our PhDs in the context of a real life, where we have to manage career sometimes and family and all. So that could be a challenge. But Rob, so what do you think was your major challenge along the way? And how did you cope with that? How did you manage that, deal with it?
Oh, I don't know that I did that so well. I think your comment about it being within the context of real life is a really important perspective for my PhD journey. Mine took over 10 years. I had, just trying to think how old the kids were when I started. They've sort of grown up not knowing any different. Their dad's doing a PhD, and what we've seen means we will never, ever do something like that. I've had 5 family members die during the course of the PhD. I had a heart attack. there's a whole lot of life took place. Now, part of that is simply because it took so many years. Well, of course, something's going to happen. But for me, I think the hardest part was just keep pushing through and doing the thing. At times it became repetitive, it became difficult. And one of the key factors in the PhD is definitely the supervisory relationship. I carefully chose my principal supervisor, got on so well with him. I thought this was going to be absolutely wonderful. Chose the co-supervisor. She had this methodology that I thought was going to be brilliant, exactly what I needed. Things were wonderful. A few months in, the principal supervisor said, well, look, I'm medically retiring. I'll see you later. And basically that was about it. I'm not exaggerating. And then the co-supervisor had to pick it up and carry it. And then I was interdisciplinary. Sociology was not my first language. And it wasn't even my fluent language at that point. So she and I struggled in communicating for quite a while. And I can say this because it's the sort of thing we've spoken about. And I don't think I'm saying anything inappropriate in a public sphere. So she and I struggled for quite a while. And for about a year, that was a really difficult tension that we both worked within. But we found a way through it or grew beyond it or something happened, as well as another supervisor got brought in, and that made all the difference. So the big challenge for me, I think, was mostly, the key one was that supervisory relationship and finding a way to make that work despite some of the great difficulty that both the lady who became my principal supervisor, Angela Coco, and I worked through it and beyond it and really developed quite a good relationship. That's my take on the process.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Maia, can you tell us about what did you find to be probably, you know, your most important challenge, and how did you sort of deal with that?
I've got a few challenges. I think my biggest was I'm a real perfectionist and struggle with anxiety, and I never felt like I was doing enough. So I always had that kind of anxiety and feeling like, oh, I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more. I struggled quite a bit with multitasking, with publishing while working on my thesis. That was something that I don't have any real answers to, except that I did publish quite a bit collaboratively, and ironically often felt comfortable to kind of take the lead, but on my own there were just some confidence issues, I think, that led to struggles there. A big challenge that I definitely learn a lot from was my kind of hesitation to seek feedback on early drafts. I just wanted to hold on to everything until I was happy with it, which was never. I would get to the end and I would write a 12,000 word chapter and then ask for feedback, and it was, I'll save that for suggestions because I know that's a question coming up. And another challenge was just all of the unforeseen delays, the time that you don't kind of anticipate. And that kind of started for me from the get-go, where I found out I got my APA scholarship at Christmas time, and it took until May for my paperwork to be processed to actually officially be admitted to SCU. And then it took, probably 7+ months for my ethics to be approved, and just kind of those repeated sort of delays. That was a challenge, but also probably maybe a blessing because it gave me a little bit of breathing space that I needed.
Oh, look, thanks for sharing that, Maia. Alison, I might move on to you. I mean, you probably had some similar sorts of challenges to Rob and Maia. Tell us about some of your challenges and how you.
Okay, I guess the major challenge for me was choosing such a dark and disturbing topic to spend the next 5 years on, and that is, mentally unwell mothers. with, you know, under past psychiatric practices. And what I found was many of the mothers in my data set weren't really mentally unwell. If we're thinking about the early 20th century, some of the mothers' files I had from the 1920s were simply unmarried. So out of about 31 mothers' files I had, there was about 8 that were unmarried mothers. And that was considered such a stigma and taboo in society that their families put them in mental asylums. So I found that very difficult. So more social factors, in a way, that doctors overlooked. And then, of course, in the 20s, there were several women who'd lost many male members to the First World War. So, yeah, how did I manage such a dark topic? I don't think I've ever gotten over, really. You know, even today, the stories in those mental patient files, they are all sad stories. Luckily for me, I had some very supportive friends who I could go and debrief with. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Alison. Peter, I mean, you know, having the double whammy, you make it sound easy, but she alluded that it might not have been quite so easy. Would you like to tell us more about some of the challenges along your path and how you manage them? You're on mute, Peter. Unmute yourself, please.
PhD was never easy. However, it's very motivating. I have to stand up. I hope you can see my shirt said autism something, something, something. It's not a disorder. I'm autistic, clinically diagnosed as autistic last year. So my challenge was how much I expose myself in my autoethnography. Some of the experience I gone through, they were not pretty. So that was my major challenge. Regarding supervisor, I don't care about relationships because I don't know about relationship. I'm still learning. So I just whip them along instead of the other way around. I don't know it's right or wrong, but I did it anyway. My 4 years with my supervisors, I have the same thing that I'm going to retire, and then another one say I'm going to retire, so you better hurry up, which I did. Personal health, I have no personal health issue when I did my DBA, but I have heaps of issue when I did my PhD. I have a life-threatening surgery, followed by 33, 37 radiation courses. I have a stroke, and but that did not stop me because I am autistic, and the only thing I know is to get it done, to finish it, which I did. I never took a single day off. As I said, I don't know about relationship. I'm still learning about what relationship is. I don't care what other people told me. I don't care, especially what my supervisor told me. I did it my way. They are important, I know, but I did it my way anyway. And because it's a PhD, it's my baby, it's my 4 years of my life. I want to do it this way. No one can tell me what I am supposed to do. Okay. After all, the topic a PhD person working on, he or she is the expert of that topic. I stick to that.
I agree.
Yes. And I can hear you, no worries. Hello. But you can take over. there, I'll shut up.
Look, thanks for sharing that, Peter. That's a wonderful story. Joe,
I still have one more challenge.
Yep.
But my major challenge was admin work. Admin tasks became so trivial, so daunting, so distracting that admin work had triggered a number of times my autistic reaction, which I was trying to not to have another autistic experience, because every autistic experience, it was too painful for me. So I would say why I can't understand why administrative work have become so daunting, so impossible to manage. Unlike 2009 when I did my DBA, admin work was a piece of cake, but now it's getting so hard. I don't know if I were to do a PhD again, I could even pass ethnic clearance. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Peter. That's fantastic. And you're getting lots of hits on the chat, I can tell you. You know, so thanks, Joe. When you were working with me, I think you were pretty close to completion, and I think from recollection you did it in pretty good time. So yeah, it seems to make it easy to me, but maybe you've got a story.
I had quite a few challenges. My first one was that I changed unis to come and do my PhD at SCU because things weren't working well at the other uni. I've never regretted it, but it did set me back. So even though I'd collected my data, in a lot of ways I started again, but it meant that I had good supervisors. I don't think I would have finished if I'd stayed at my other uni. So that was my first challenge. I also had medical stuff, so I think it's just an age thing. I had major shoulder surgery during my candidature, and I'd had major surgery previously. I tend to bounce back pretty quick from things. I had no idea how much that was going to knock me around. I couldn't sleep for the first 4 weeks, and then I had another 2 to 3 months of not being able to sleep properly, and I had a big teaching load at the time. So I had to pretty much, and I could only use one arm. So I was slow in everything I did. I was slow in working on the computer, but I was slow in all my daily activities. And so I really had to drop my research just to get through the teaching. So I found that really hard because I felt really torn, and I felt like my timeline was slipping away from me. So that was my, I guess once I got here, my main challenge. The other challenge was I did a project that was way too big. I could have got a PhD based on my survey or my video data, but I was never sure the video data was going to work, so I had to go with both. And if anyone's ever done video editing and knows how much time that takes, analysing video data takes about 10 times longer than editing. So that was quite, it was great because you relived every dive when you watched it, but it was extremely time consuming. And I always live near the sea, so the sea's a big distraction for me. So there was always that pull, the pull of the ocean as well. But yeah, they were my main ones.
Okay, so Maia, I'd like to ask, we'd move on to another line of questioning. Maia, we've talked about challenges and all that sort of stuff, but can you tell me something about what was your favourite highlight from your journey or achievement?
Yeah, I think the making lifelong friendships with supervisors and colleagues and HDR students from SCU, from other Australian universities and from, places around the world have been a real highlight for me, presenting at those national and international conferences to make those connections and sustaining them through, planning writing retreats and writing collaboratively has been really, really generative and inspiring. And definitely just the opportunity to develop my research skills, my knowledge and my understanding of the world, and just learning every day how much I don't know and how much, how passionate and dedicated I am to being a lifelong learner.
Well, thanks, Maia. Alison, what about you?
Highlights?
Yeah.
Definitely graduation and wearing that floppy hat on stage was pretty awesome. During my candidature, the highlight for me was accessing 30 patient files and the difficulties of what are normally closed files. So in Victoria, the files were closed for 75 years. And I thought I'd backed myself into a corner. But with supervisors writing support letters, we got access to what is normally closed files. Got access with approval from Chief Psychiatrist in Victoria and the then Health Minister, Daniel Andrews, who we're quite familiar with today. So I did get access despite enclosed files and having the support of the university. And so I was able to travel to Melbourne and work in the Department of Human Services, which I thought would take me a week. So 3 weeks later, I got the files to form my sort of data set. So that was a major highlight because I thought I might have had to kind of chuck it in and start again. But it just shows you there are ways through that supervisors can help you with. So that was a major highlight.
Alison, can I jump in and ask a question very quickly? So did you just get access to 30 files or did you get access to more and then choose 30?
Right. I got access to the whole archive, which was like a warehouse, aircraft hangar full of those compactor files. So that's why it took me 3 weeks, because they had a whole lot of other types of files that I wasn't interested in. And then, and then it took me ages to find mothers from that era and kind of fit my limitation. So yeah, I had access to the whole lot. That's why it took me a long time, but it was very exciting as a historian to access an archive that's normally closed. So thanks for the question.
Rob, what were some of your highlights?
Well, I'd like to say graduation. Thanks, Alison.
Yes.
And I know Maia's also made a similar comment. Thanks to COVID, there was no graduation this year. I finished last year. Look, one of the highlights was getting the phone call from the supervisor saying it's all in and, go and address these issues. But hey, you're passing basically.
So
there's no graduation.
Are you going to undertake the ritual at some point?
I have told them, I've written a couple of times, say, please keep me on the list. I want to wear the silly hat and the blue dress.
Can I just give a shout out to my beautiful friends Katie and Lisa and Tilly and lots of others. They organised, we had just a bit of a graduation lunch and they organised to bring the floppy hat and the gown and we wore it. It was like a graduation. It was very special.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think it's important. So ask me in a year's time and I'll say, yeah, that was a highlight, although probably a bit passé by then. Another highlight was first publication. Thinking, oh, I can write stuff. Oh, someone's interested in this, which was then followed by the first time it was cited by someone else. And then I think the other highlight I'd like to say is that having finished, I thought I need to start doing something with it. So I gathered up all my data, spoke to Grayson Cook in Arts and Social Sciences, said, is there a student who can make an infographic of this for me? So I've turned my data into this nice little infographic. If you go to my ResearchGate page, you'll see it's there as a poster. And that's it. All this blooming work for a PhD and it can just be turned into one page with pretty colors on it. That's all I did. But gee, it's a great sense of achievement. You want to see what I did? I can give you one page and there it is all summarized with pretty colors. So that was a good achievement in my book.
Absolutely.
Peter, what's your favorite? Well, you've got two, the double whammy. What was your favorite highlight out of any of them?
It was definitely graduation, marching through Lismore CBD with all the local cheering me as if I have won an Olympic gold for Southern Cross.
Oh, those were the days, weren't they? When this was a real university.
And other thrill of my life, I make 3 friends for life, study buddies. First one was Dr. Philip Abro. He kept me going till the end. He told me his story. He told me that he had a liver transplant. So what was radiation surgery kick stuff compared to liver transplant? So he motivated me to go on. I have Dennis Richards. He motivated me every Friday. I have Megan. She motivated me to publish at The Conversation. I had the readership of a mere 15,000 compared to Megan 500,000 over. It was nothing. But thank you, Megan. You motivated me to write to The Conversation. So I have another thrill, and that was sometime this year, a few months ago. I got a call and got a letter. Oh, everything good, but no graduation ceremony. So I went out and bought a black gown because I could not get hold of a blue gown like the SCU gown, and then have a small graduation ceremony in my yucca farm, and that was fantastic. That was my thing. Thank you.
Joanne, what was yours?
Okay, my big highlight was my field work, and I thought that's what everyone would say. I got to spend 4 weeks in Chuuk in Federated States of Micronesia diving wrecks. If anyone's not familiar with it, it's they're all World War II wrecks. There's between 50 and 60 shipwrecks in the lagoon and around 13 aircraft. The water's 30 degrees and it's clear. So that was a pretty big highlight because it's one of my favourite places to go wreck diving. So to get to spend 4 weeks there, yes, I was working hard, but it was awesome. I think changing unis was a highlight because I got better supervisors and I found the support at SCU just far surpassed anything I had at my other uni. I mean, the support from SCPA, but also the support from the graduate school was totally different to what the other university offered, which was basically nothing. I'd like to say I did get to graduate, but it wasn't very much of a highlight for me. I spent my graduation severely stressed. My mother had had an accident which had made her dementia worse. It meant the world to her to be there, so we moved heaven and earth to get her there, and I graduated at the Gold Coast instead of Lismore to make that happen. But I spent my whole graduation ceremony completely freaking out that she was going to start making loud and inappropriate comments. Thankfully, all she did was clap when other people didn't clap. So everyone got a second clap from Mum. But I'm glad she saw it, but I was so uptight and so stressed that she was going to do something really inappropriate. But I think one of the highlights, which I might talk about a bit later in the reflection, is that I hadn't really appreciated until I took up a job after my PhD, is how differently doing a PhD has made me think and analyse information. And I hadn't really appreciated that would happen until first day on the job I was asked to do, it was thrown in, I'd been an hour in the job and I was asked to do something really, really complex. And it was in doing that I really realised what the PhD had done for me.
Thanks, Jo. Peter, I'd be interested to know how has life after PhD, well, in your case, PhD and DBA treated you? Are you still some travelling speaker, only now earning about 20,000 times much per hour, or what are you doing with life now, Peter?
My life is very simple. Mahjong, Chinese Mahjong. For those of you that know what Mahjong is, Netflix, Spotify, Instagram, YouTube. So that's my life. But I got a bunch of animals that I am looking after them. I just acquire some chooks, some ducks, and some birds. Oh, gee, a lot of things that keep me busy. And jokes aside, seriously, I am taking up a third PhD, a third doctoral project, something to do with social change. And I'll talk to you as a guest, as a panel speaker again in 4 years, okay?
Anytime, Peter. Anytime. You're always welcome. In fact, Peter and everyone here, Shay and I and a few of the committee last night were talking about the possibility of establishing an alumni wing of the Postgrad Association so that we could continue to use your brains trust to inspire us down the track. So you'll be one of the first ports to call, Peter, I assure you. Alison, you've been keeping busy, I believe. So how has life after PhD been for you?
Okay, pretty good. I graduated in 2016, and what I did was enroll straight away into coursework. So I did a higher degree certificate in tertiary teaching online with Curtin University. And after my PhD, I just loved coursework. I just blitzed my way through it, and I loved it. Because I'd been teaching all the way through as a casual tutor. So I just thought I'd, you know, kind of get some, you know, certification for that. So it was a bit crazy, but I loved it. So you know, other than that, that was a 1-year course. I've got several journal articles under review, and I've joined a research group who are actually studying Beechworth Asylum, which is an old mental institution in Victoria that still stands, and it was built in 1867. So I've joined up with other academics at Charles Sturt University that's just nearby, and been winning some funding, and they sent me down to interview ex-staff members that used to work at Beechworth Institution. We got funding to set up a website, and got a drone footage going over the old building. And also we've recently curated an exhibition of items that came from Beechworth Asylum, which is on show at Albury Library Museum. So the upshot of that is finding other academics to work with who have the same passion and same topic has been fantastic. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. Maia, I think you've maintained sort of academic connections after PhD. Tell us about your life after PhD.
I was really excited to have a bit of a holiday, a bit of a break and breathe out. I had a kind of 2-week overseas holiday planned by myself, left my husband at home, was like, I just need a moment, which was awesome. But I had a job interview kind of I think on the 3rd day of my holiday, and then found out on the final day of my holiday that I had been successful in my application for postdoctoral research fellow with the Sustainability, Environment and the Arts in Education Research Cluster. So I was very excited, but also a little bit overwhelmed. I had a wedding coming up in 2 weeks, and I had to rush home and work 50 hours a week in this new role, because there were lots of things that needed to be done urgently before I had a week off for my wedding and short honeymoon. So it was a bit crazy, but things worked out in the end. I forgot to thank some people for my wedding speech, because I was writing it like in the minutes before walking down the aisle, because I'd been so busy with work. But yeah, my postdoc role I'm so grateful and feel very, very lucky to be in that role. It's really exciting. It's very fast paced, a steep learning curve, very incredible opportunity, working on multiple research projects with incredible teams of colleagues and adult and children participants. applying for and securing different grants, project management, data collection, data analysis. My husband said, I thought you said you were going to be finished, like you're busier than you ever were. I'm like, I know. But I am having a baby next year, so I'm very excited to hopefully, it will be a different kind of challenge, but yeah, to have a little bit of breathing time from academia.
Well, congratulations, Maia. I'm sure everyone here wishes you all the best with that.
Thank you.
Joe, you had some good fortune after yours, didn't you?
Yeah, I also got no breather after my PhD, but you can't knock back work, and I don't regret it. So I was lucky enough to continue to get teaching work when I finished, and then I scored a job as the executive officer to the DVCR, and I know Mary spoke to you yesterday at the start. It's the best job I've ever had, even though I had a really interesting career pre-PhD, even though it was 32 years in government, it was still interesting. But this is by far the best job I've ever had. It's challenging, interesting, diverse, it's meaningful. I'm learning every day, and I've got the best boss I've ever had in my life. And I'm also able to continue to do research, so I'm really happy about that. She's told me to stay relevant in the role. She supports me doing research. She sees it as essential. So so that was awesome. And yeah, so I'm still with the uni. I had to give up my teaching, so that first 6 months in the job was super busy because I had to work 4 days for Mary and try and carry the teaching 1 day a week. So effectively I was working 7 days a week. So I finished my PhD exhausted, and then found myself working 7 days a week. And the role with Mary is like super full on. So yeah, it's great. I love it, but it is super full on. But, you know, despite all the difficulties we've talked about doing a PhD, and despite loving my job like I do, I'd actually really like to go back and do another one, because I really did enjoy having that dedicated time to do your own research. And it's, you know, it's a wonderful experience, and I think it's worth remembering just how lucky all of us are that we've actually had that experience in our lives, because it's quite unique. I'm not saying there was no challenges or frustrations, because believe me, there were a lot, but you know, overall, I really did enjoy the ride. I'm enjoying life afterwards as well, but I hope everyone else enjoys their ride and their post-PhD too.
Thanks, Joe. And Rob, how's life after PhD been for you, comrade?
Mine has been complicated. I finished, November last year, and the first Saturday after I had handed the thing in, I thought, what do I do now? I'm not going to the office to write PhD, fix up references, do editing. The thing's finished, what do I do? So I had to reintegrate into the routine of my family in a way that, you know, I shouldn't have been surprised by. So that was my first post-PhD experience. It sort of slapped me in the face. I then felt sort of slowly expanding that, this is finished. This weight is now lifted off my shoulders. So I've actually taken it a little bit easier. Was looking forward to my wife and I are going to take a 4-week break in the middle of the year. There was a conference to attend to, and then we're packing some nice stuff around that. Well, thank you, COVID. So haven't had the opportunity to do those sorts of things as the way of coming down. I consider myself to be a PhD student in recovery. As far as academic stuff goes, I'm still trying to work out what comes next, especially with all the changes in the universities. And surprisingly, I was getting all these news feeds saying, don't do a PhD if you think you're going to be working in academia. So I thought, okay, there's some food for thought here. I need to think this through carefully. So I'm still trying to work out how to trade off the PhD, how to engage in research, But one of the really good things I've done is connected with another academic. And Friday mornings for a couple of hours, it's on Zoom, but we basically sit down together and quick 10-minute catch up. Then we write for 25 minutes, eat cake, write for another 25 minutes, talk. So we do the Pomodoro thing. So continuing to see through some academic projects, but I'm still trying to work out what do I do now, and also post-COVID. So a little bit extra complication there, I think.
Yeah, understandably. So look, Rob, while I've got you, I want to turn now to, I think, if there was one last question that I was going to ask all of you, I reckon this is the question why everyone in the audience has turned up. So, Robert, you get to go first. If somehow you could jump in a TARDIS and you could travel back in time to when you first started out your PhD, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't chase rabbits. Would you like me to expand upon that?
Say it again.
Don't chase rabbits.
Right.
Down holes.
Yeah. I read one of the calendars they used to have on desks years and years ago. There'd be this little one-line saying, and I read one day that said, if you chase 2 rabbits, you won't catch either of them. I worked out that I'm a rabbit chaser. So basically for me, I would remind myself way back at the start, stay focused. Be careful not to get caught up in all the attractive, glittery things that the PhD is going to offer. Stay focused on what your project is. Be careful of the things that other academics or even supervisors might come along and say, well, here's something good that I think that you would enjoy being a part of. And this is something I actually learned from Alison. There was one thing in particular that I saw was offered to both she and I, and Alison was very clear and said, no, that's not for me. And I said, yes, I'll do that. But that for me was the first rabbit that I started chasing that I shouldn't have done. So for me, stay focused. This is your project. You're going to do it for the next few years. You'll get it done sooner and have a far better, clearer result if you don't go do all these other things. So yeah, that's the advice for me and for anybody else who chases rabbits.
Thanks. That's so beautifully put, Robert. I remember when Peter Baverstock was doing a research years ago, and he would say pretty much the same thing. He'd say, look, your job is to produce one tiny little rock, one tiny little brick of solid gold, rather than a whole wall of mud brick. And that, you know, really this is a ticket to your PhD. It's a ticket to research. It's not your magnum opus. Save some stuff for publication later is what he would say. So that all resonates with exactly with what you said, Rob. Maia, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice, if you had 20/20 hindsight, what advice would you give yourself?
I think to just have confidence in myself and trust myself and my abilities and enjoy the process, not constantly be thinking, oh God, I should be doing more. I think a really kind of central thing that I still kind of try and be active in avoiding is comparing myself to other people, how much other people are working or how many other extra things they seem to be doing and juggling and keeping lots of balls in the air. One that I mentioned earlier around seeking feedback on to save yourself a lot of time. Even, you know, as simple as sharing dot point outlines with your supervisors and saying, look, this is where I'm thinking, heading. What are your thoughts? And probably a big one for me is just paying attention to word limits. I was able to push the kind of envelope a little bit in terms of my final word limit for my thesis, but I would have saved myself a good 8 months if I had just been kind of stricter with myself, and I could have used that 8 months. I could have published a lot of journal articles or, you know, started a lot of publications rather than spending all that time kind of trying to find little bits here and there to cull from my PhD.
Thanks, Maia. Ali?
was okay with avoiding chasing rabbits, and so my challenge was the actual writing. I don't think I had much in the way of skills of writing before I started. So if I could go back now, I would say start the writing earlier. Write every day, even if it's just a bunch of rubbish. Just practice that writing. Even if you're just correcting or editing your sentences, or if you can't write, go and sort your references, reading, taking note. So for me, it was write earlier, write often, and even write stream of consciousness, write anything. So yeah, and I guess my advice is writing often and small chunks, small bites, as often as you can. And it doesn't matter if it makes the final piece or not, just get into that practice of writing and writing in small, you know, if you just get a couple of sentences down or a paragraph or more, great, but small chunks, small bites. Next thing you know, I guess I'm opposite to Maia. I'm an underwriter. I write very simple, straightforward sentences, and I had to expand on my points. So I didn't overwrite, I was underwriter. So anyway, yeah, write every day, write in small chunks. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Can I just say one thing very briefly, Alison? I kept, not the whole way through, but I kept a researcher journal. So I just jot down things I was struggling with, things that I hadn't thought about and came to me in the middle of the night.
Right.
Yeah, things that came up in my supervisory meetings that I hadn't considered, and that was all there at the end when I did my analysis, and I was able to go back and I actually used parts of that researcher journal in my PhD to kind of demonstrate how I went about things and the rigor of my research.
Excellent.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, Joanne, what advice would you give yourself if you could travel back in time?
Sorry, I've got renovations going on in the background, so I muted myself. I'm going to say something quite different that kind of goes against what other people have said. I think the most important thing is to enjoy the journey. I was pretty mindful of that. I quit. I'd worked for government for 32 years and quit so I could immerse myself in the research and really enjoy it. I'm not sure I achieved it to the extent that I intended to, but my main advice to myself would be to enjoy the journey. A lot of people are going to tell you the things that everyone's been saying. I look at it a lot different to that. I think those things are important, but I also think the PhD journey is about learning to become a researcher, and I think that you learn really well from your mistakes. And I think that, yes, I should have written more earlier too, but I kind of wouldn't give myself that advice because that was all part of the learning process of becoming a researcher. So I actually probably would just say enjoy the journey, and that's it.
Peter, what words of wisdom would you give yourself?
Confucius said, no, seriously, I know what I can contribute to my thesis, to my PhD or debate journey, but what can a supervisor contribute to page 2 of my thesis? So before I sign the dotted line, not them, on my PhD proposal, I would ask them to spell out what they can contribute to the page 2 of my thesis. In other words, from their publishing experience, how can they see what kind of publication, what kind of innovation, what kind of contribution to my knowledge of my potential PhD journey can they contribute with me in peer-reviewed journals? That's what I would have done. Second, because I have the experience of and also because of my autistic reasoning, and I know that admin work is going to be even more complicated and difficult and daunting. So I would budget in a one-on-one admin support person in my PhD proposal. That's what I think I would have done.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Well, look, everyone, we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes left, and I think I'd like to throw to questions from the floor. You know, if you've got a question you'd like to ask any of our fantastic panelists, please feel free to unmute yourself and put on your camera and ask a question, or you can always Zoom us in the Zoom chat box and I can read out your question for you. But would anyone like to ask a question from the audience?
Craig, I'll ask a question. I'll just start my camera there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So one of the things that I've found I'm sort of 12 months in, I'm a part-time student, and one of the things that I found really, I just wasn't prepared for was how, in a sense, destabilizing the research has been so far. So I'm a law PhD student, and so I'm having to read lots of philosophy, you know, lots of Plato, Socrates, Hegel, Marx, you know, Hobbes, and they have some really big, really confronting ideas. And, you know, for myself, I find that it sort of breaks down everything I know and believe. And so that I find a bit destabilizing, but sometimes it also then to move then to the very mundane. So you might be reading, you know, some you know, Marx's theory of alienation, and then somebody might come up and try and talk to you about The Bachelor. And you have to try and switch mindsets very quickly. And I personally just find that sometimes I can't make that move between those two mindsets very easily at all.
Could you unmute yourself, Richard? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there was an ambulance going in the background there, so I just muted. So I guess the only person I've ever seen really express this is Bertrand Russell, and he says something like, well, you know, if you read philosophy, it will free you from the tyranny of custom, but it will raise very significant doubts in your mind. And I just wonder if any of the graduates have encountered that, and if so, how they dealt with it.
Rob, yeah, Rob.
Not quite addressing what you're saying there, Richard, but it took me a little while before it finally occurred to me. I was actually studying a philosophy degree. Now, I was in the discipline of sociology, but at some point, I'm a slow learner, it was probably in my second year, it suddenly occurred to me, oh wow, I'm actually studying philosophy and not really doing sociology. That's what will emerge from it. So for me, it was a matter of sort of accepting that and actually just enjoying this new part of the journey that I had now suddenly recognized. As far as navigating the world of the mundane and the, you know, the deeper philosophical concepts, yeah, that's a bit of a strange one. And sometimes my conversations with family and friends, I think, starts off a bit awkwardly because I haven't made that jump. But I think it means that when I do talk about, I guess I avoid The Bachelor, but my conversations about those things are a little bit more rich and a little bit more informed. I think just find a way to go with it. It's a whole new complex arrangement of thoughts that are developing within you and that you will incorporate and build together to produce this new thing called your thesis and what you do after that, beside it and through it. Not sure if that addresses it, but that's my reflection on the on your comments.
Thanks, Robert. Shay, did you have a question? You're on mute. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. No, I didn't specifically have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. What a wonderfully rich and inspiring panel session. And I'm inspired and I'm humbled. And yeah, How fabulous, just fabulous. I don't have much else to say, but I just wanted to tell you all that. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your time with us here today. Deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting us on. It's been really, really interesting to hear everybody. Yeah, so thanks for the invitation.
So I've got a question in the Zoom chat from Katie, who says, this might be a weird question, but how regularly did you engage with your PhD? Daily, once every 2 days, whenever you felt like it? After, she says, after weekends, I sometimes feel guilty of not having worked at all on my PhD.
Can I say something, Craig?
Yeah, sure.
I tried to treat mine like a job, which wasn't always possible when I was teaching as well, but I tried to keep mine to weekdays because work-life balance is really important. And there were weekends where I mean, there are times when you just have to pull out all stops and do it, but you need to give yourself a break. You work much more effectively when you do have breaks, but it is sometimes hard Monday morning to wind yourself back up into it. But yeah, I tried to take weekends off as much as possible.
I did see a question there, which I've forgotten who asked, but broadly it was about what were your experiences with technology? I think it might have been from Kay actually. Did you have any glitches with
Hell.
Kay says, for instance, it was the biggest mistake in her life using EndNote. She had all sorts of problems with managing EndNote. So how was it to you guys?
I think and I can't believe I didn't talk about technological challenges in my challenges, but that was one of the big struggles for me. I had, I think, about 150 photos that I'd taken in schools that I included in my research, and trying to navigate that, having photos and text moving and all of that. I just recently did an advanced word training workshop through SCPA. And I think it just needs to be mandatory for all PhD students at the introduction, when you do, so you do your introduction and then you do a full day advanced word training the day after, because I learned like so many things that I just was like banging my head against a wall at how many, hours I could have saved. And yeah, EndNote was a real struggle for me too. I think I had 850 references in my reference list, and it didn't like me at all. And it was weeks and weeks of formatting, and yeah, that was a huge struggle. And I think just reaching out and kind of finding any training that you can do as early as you can is a huge help, or saving up and paying someone to do your formatting for you. But I was too nervous about that because I was scared they'd delete a sentence or something.
Rob.
Sort of building on what Maia's saying, I became a little bit frustrated towards the end of the PhD because it moved from being a researcher to not even being a communicator, but to being a word processor and having to work out how you do master documents and all of that. So it moved from the research analysis and drawing these wonderful earth-shattering conclusions to how do I use Word? So yeah, be prepared for that one and take Maia's advice and get the training.
If I could just remind everyone here in the audience as well, look, we were fortunate to have restored this year our funding for our advanced skills training programs and stuff like that. And what we found in the past, is that if we try to anticipate what you want or tell you what you need, it may not always be the appropriate sort of training. We work much best as a postgrad association when you tell us how we can help you. What sort of training do you want? And if you get in contact with Katie or any of us, Leslie or I, we're all happy to listen to you. If you've got a good idea about something that where we can make your technical skill a lot more capable and life a lot easier, we're more than happy to help. Anyway, look, it's just past 2 o'clock now, so I think it's time to unwind. Look, thank you very much. I know that everyone here in the audience really appreciates the time that you've taken. I think everyone feels really inspired. Certainly I'm inspired. As someone who flunked my PhD journey, I feel really inspired by all of you who have completed, and I'm very grateful and honoured that you've been here with us to share your words of wisdom. So on behalf of everyone from SCPA, thanks everyone, and well done, and all the best in your future careers.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
And
really good.
I'll get that alumni wing of the SCPA started sooner rather than later.
Thanks,
Sounds
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd like to just jump in briefly here with a tiny bit of housekeeping. Thank you so much, everyone. Thoroughly enjoyed the session. We're just moving into our lunch